I'm Lisa Stone, and you are listening to Season 8 of Parenting Aces.
Welcome to Season 8 of the Parenting Aces Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week we are going to be discussing Division III recruiting with Jordan Brown, who is currently working in the admissions department at Occidental College in Los Angeles, California. And Jordan is a former junior player, a former college player. He played, as you will hear in the podcast, at Fordham University his freshman year, which is Division I, and then decided to make a transfer to Oxy, which is a Division III school, Occidental College. And he has really great insights on what the pros and cons are of each division of college tennis and what prospective student athletes can expect to gain from both of them. His current role is as the Assistant Dean of Admission and Coordinator of Student-Athlete Recruitment at Occidental College. He got his bachelor's at Oxy and a master's degree in education policy from Columbia University. So he went coast to coast to coast for his educational training and is now back in the Southern California area where he is living and working at Oxy. So I am thrilled to have Jordan on and to have him share his insights and experiences with all of you. I also want to just remind you, if you haven't already, to please be sure to take a look at our tennis parent recruiting panel that we are doing as part of the WTCA conference in New York on August 23rd. It is, a half-day panel. We will have college coaches from Division I, Division II, Division III, and NAIA schools, and they will be there to discuss the recruiting process with you, to answer questions, and basically just to serve as a resource. That panel is comprised only of women's tennis coaches, and so we are inviting those of you who have daughters who aspire to play college tennis. Next year, we're hoping to expand the panel to cover parents of both boys and girls. But this year, since it is the WTCA, the Women's Tennis Coaching Association, we figure we'll start with the girls. So the link for that conference to get more information and to register is on our website, ParentingAces.com. If you're a premium member of ParentingAces.com, you get a really nice discount off the registration. So check that out as well. And now I would like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Jordan Brown. Welcome, Jordan Brown, to the Parenting Aces podcast.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to catch up with you. You reminded me when we were speaking offline earlier that you and I had crossed paths a while back, and here we are crossing paths again. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to do the podcast and share your knowledge and experience with the Parenting Aces audience. So thank you.
Oh, well, I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. So before we delve into Division III recruiting and Division III college tennis, which is the thrust of today's conversation, I would love for you to give our audience a little bit of background on your life in tennis.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So I guess first and foremost, I am a tennis fanatic. I eat, sleep, breathe tennis. And that really started, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I'm originally from San Diego, so I competed in Southern California junior tennis tournaments. And really, when I think about kind of my college search, it was pretty driven by my passion for tennis. I was very much someone who was adamant that they were going to play college tennis. I was especially excited about the prospect of playing Division I college tennis, which is ultimately what led me to Fordham University, where I enrolled for my first year. And then at Fordham, I had a overall very positive experience, but I really wanted a small liberal arts college I realized would be a better fit for my academic interests and the kind of community I was hoping for. And it also kind of came to bear that I realized Division III tennis had a level of competition that really was a great fit for me as well. And I ultimately transferred to Occidental College, where I finished my finished my degree and played 3 years there. And then I actually was an assistant tennis coach after I graduated for 2 years. And then our paths crossed when I was doing public relations work for Wilson Tennis. And I mean, the ability to just kind of stay involved in tennis in my professional life has been amazing. And then I went to graduate school at Columbia and played club tennis on the Columbia tennis team. And now I'm in my current role in my dream job as the coordinator of Student-Athlete Recruitment at Occidental College.
Fantastic. And so, it's so funny to hear you say, like, the dream was to play Division I. And that seems to be the case with a lot of junior players. A lot of junior coaches kind of promote that ideal. Parents buy into that whole concept of Division I is better than Division II or Division III. And the more I learn, the more I realize that's really not necessarily the case.
No, I mean, absolutely. I was totally ignorant of the Division III tennis landscape. But when I think about Division III tennis now, you can't help but think of the quality of junior players that are choosing to play Division III tennis. And you only need to look at, the UTRs and the tennisrecruiting.net kind of recruiting rankings to get a sense of the caliber of player that's choosing Division III. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that the competition's good. You're going to have good matches. The other thing is if you're a really high achieving junior tennis player and you go D3, then you have a chance to really leave a legacy, do something special. And then there's also really, really rigorous, great academic institutions that are part of the D3 ecosystem. And then I guess maybe the last thing is affordability. A lot of Division III schools, especially well-resourced liberal arts colleges, are going to be able to provide generous financial aid. And we know with men's tennis for Division I, they offer 4.5 scholarships that are going to be divided up amongst the whole tennis team. So it's not necessarily the case that that scholarship offer is going to be there and it's more affordable to go D1. In many cases, it's not.
Right. And that's a kind of a point that I've been trying to drive home to the Parenting Aces community is a lot of times there is, as you say, much more scholarship money available at the Division III level than there is at Division I. And on top of that, if for some reason a junior player gets to college and decides after a year, 2 years, 3 years that they're done playing tennis, a tennis scholarship goes away if you leave the tennis team. An academic scholarship does not go away as long as you keep your grades up. And so I think, that to me is a really important piece of the puzzle because as well as I do how expensive junior tennis development is. And, to be able to sort of recoup some of that expense in the form of college scholarship money is invaluable.
No, absolutely. Not to mention the kind of balance that comes with the practice regulations at the Division III level. I think it really cultivates kind of a healthy relationship with the sport and probably leads to less burnout. And at least kind of was my case in my experience. I really appreciated the kind of the more balanced life I was able to have as a D3 student athlete.
So what happened at Fordham that caused you to realize it wasn't the best fit for you?
Well, so I really, as I mentioned when I was in high school, I really let tennis drive my own college search. And I was pretty set on playing Division I tennis, and that was one of the main reasons why I picked Fordham. That and because I told my parents I wanted to be as far from San Diego as I possibly could go. So I went to New York. But when I was there, I realized that kind of academically, a small liberal arts college was more in line with my own kind of intellectual curiosities and the kinds of things that I wanted to study. I also realized that there's a sense of community and a relationship-based culture at a small school that I was really looking for. And then on the tennis front, I mean, it really didn't. I had a little bit of kind of buyer's remorse with what I was hoping for. I got there and I was like, oh, this is a lot of practice. I really feel kind of unbalanced. And not to mention, when I was at Fordham, I can't speak to the quality of the team now. We weren't particularly good, so we also lost a lot.
And that's never fun.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is kind of, dominating my college experience, and I'm taking a lot of losses. I had probably a more negative relationship with tennis there than I did in my subsequent years.
Interesting. And so, this is another point that I think it's important for parents and players, junior players, to hear, is that all Division I programs are not created equally, just as all Division III programs are not created equally. And there is a wide range of funding available for the tennis program. There's a wide range of expectations for the team in terms of practice hours, in terms of academic success. There's a lot of range in terms of how many perks the team is getting from the school, what kind of travel arrangements they may have. And so there are a lot of different factors that need to be weighed as you're choosing your college, that next step in your tennis development, your college paths. So now that you are I have to read your title because it's so long, the Assistant Dean of Admission and Coordinator of Student-Athlete Recruitment. What does that role entail?
Yeah. So I definitely wear several different hats. Part of it is guiding prospective student athletes through the admission process, right? Like the coaches are going to be the leaders in the actual recruitment of the student athletes. But I'm there, if there's questions about kind of how to apply, what sorts of things factor into our evaluation of applicants. I work with coaches to help facilitate visits to campus. I also work with coaches to identify strategies for more successful recruitment that aligns with kind of their goals, as well as Occidental's kind of overall enrollment goals of enrolling, highly academically prepared student athletes. And I'm able to also meet with students on campus and talk a little bit about kind of what makes Oxy distinct, or the things that I think are important to know about Occidental. So it's a really, really fun job. And getting back to your earlier point about kind of thinking about how not all tennis programs are not created equal. I think it's really important when, prospective students are building out their college lists, when they're thinking about playing a sport at the college. Really, it's not too different from someone who's not thinking about playing a sport at the college. If you need to think about whether or not the academic programs align with your interests, you want to think about what size school is kind of what you're looking for. You want to think about the location. And then you want to overlay that athletic piece. And those are all the things that you were talking about, maybe relationship with the coach, where you fit into the lineup potentially, what kind of, how big of a role you want tennis to be a part of your student experience. Think about, commitment to practice times and travel for matches. Occidental competes in the Southern California Intercollegiate Athletic Conference with 8 other schools that are within 90 minutes of us. There's really limited travel. So you're not going to have to miss extended class time. So those kinds of considerations should also enter into the calculus. And I think that's how I always try to advise students to begin thinking about their college lists.
And so with Division III, what are the major differences between how things are done on a day-to-day basis versus a Division I program? I mean, you experienced both as a student athlete, and now you're in the upper echelons of administration at a D3 school.
So the biggest difference are restrictions around practice time. So at the Division III level, you have a traditional season and a non-traditional season. So for tennis, that's going to be non-traditional in the fall and traditional in the spring. Non-traditional means that you can practice, I forget the number, but somewhere between 20 and 30 hours with a coach for that season. That doesn't mean that that's all the tennis you're going to play in the fall. There's always practices that are going to be led by captains, and you're certainly on your own volition able to practice as much as you like with your teammates. But it can't be compulsory. So you cannot have mandated 6 days a week practice for, the entire fall. In the spring, the traditional season, that's going to look a little bit more like maybe what a Division I season looks like, with 6 days a week practice, 20 to 24 match dates, strength and conditioning in the afternoon after you've already hit. So that's going to be kind of a little more in line with the Division I level of intensity. But the big difference is that there is an off season.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Division I, there is, the fall season's the individual season. So it is different from the spring dual match season. But depending again on the school, like I will tell you, my son's freshman year, he was at a Division I school, and they went to one tournament in the fall, and that was it. That was the extent of their competition in the fall. In the spring, obviously, there was the dual match season, but not every school is sending players to tournaments and events all fall. Not at the D1 level and not at the D3 level. It depends, right?
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So for me, I think the two biggest issues that differentiate D1 and D3 to me are, one, as you said, that balance of academics and athletics. And at Division III, a player truly is a student athlete. They are a student first and an athlete second. Division I, at a lot of the programs, you can almost flip that around and call them athlete students.
Yeah.
Did you feel that when you were at a Division I school? Did you feel like the athletics kind of trumped everything else?
Yeah, my year at Fordham, my identity as a tennis player was definitely the most salient part of my experience. And then transferring to Division III school at Occidental, not only was I on the tennis team, but I was able to work in the admissions office. I was a senior fellow, which meant I interviewed prospective students, which is part of why I work in admissions now. And then I also was able to teach health workshops through an organization on campus in ninth grade classrooms all across Los Angeles at schools where they don't offer a health curriculum. Mm-hmm. And I was really only able to pursue these other things, which were tremendous opportunities for growth for me, again, because of the flexibility and balance afforded at the Division III level.
Right. What did you major in? I forgot to ask you that.
I was a philosophy major.
Wow. Okay. And you took that into a marketing PR type job right out of school. Kind of interesting. Yep. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I would think the philosophy comes in very handy in your current role.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the level of kind of analytical thinking that is required for philosophy, the clarity needed in writing absolutely helps me in my current role when I evaluate applications. It helps me. It certainly helps me in the PR world when I would write those press releases. And just kind of the level of critical thinking that's required, as well as something I think that really kind of transcends into any field. So I'm super grateful for my philosophy degree.
And that's not a typical tennis player major, right? I mean, I've interviewed a bunch of players who played in college, and, a lot of them are business and marketing or sports marketing, or maybe, something related to health and PE. So philosophy, yeah, were any of your teammates philosophy majors too?
No. And in fact, there were only 5 philosophy majors in my entire graduating class. So not many people were philosophy majors in general.
That's so interesting. Mm-hmm. So can we go back to your role, your PR role, where you and I first met, and kind of what led you as a philosophy major to take a PR job, and how you were able to get hired to do that work for Wilson Tennis?
Yeah, that was really a lot of luck, if I'm being completely honest. I ended up applying for a job at a PR agency in Orange County after I graduated, and I was hired. And then within probably 6 weeks of being hired, Wilson was brought on as a client. And I had no idea that was going to be the case when they had hired me. And I also had the most sophisticated level of tennis knowledge, which is not necessarily saying a lot of anyone in the office. So immediately I was kind of thrust into more of a leadership role, which I was super grateful for. And I also got to work on stuff that I was incredibly passionate about. So I definitely just kind of right place, right time.
Yeah, but I'm a firm believer and we make our own luck. And so there was something, that led you there. And this whole notion that you did have this love of tennis and that you were able to utilize that in a way to help you get ahead professionally is pretty awesome.
Well, thank you. And I did know at the time that the PR agency worked with athletic and fitness brands. So it wasn't also, I should clarify that was also part of the reason of what drove me to that particular agency. So I think, having kind of a soft focus and trying to find the things that you're interested in and being open-minded really can lead you down, a path that you never expected, but maybe an awesome fit.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to switch gears again, and we're going to go back to this whole recruiting idea because it's about, when this airs, it's going to be almost the end of July. Kids are getting ready to go back to school. And for those who are entering their senior year of high school and maybe haven't made a decision about where they want to play college tennis, I would love for you to talk a little bit about specifically what they should be doing at the outset of their senior year to really kind of jumpstart the recruiting and help them get to a place where they're ready to commit somewhere.
Totally. And I want to ease anyone's anxiety that if, it is the end of July and you have no idea where you're going to college or you're not even sure where you're going to apply, that is totally okay. That is totally okay. I would first start, like I said, by really trying to come up with some set of criteria around what sorts of qualities you're looking for in a school. Overlay that tennis piece, right? Like try to understand, and we have to be really honest with ourselves. I know I wanted to believe that maybe I was better than I was, especially when I was 17 years old, but really have kind of, open eyes to, what your level of kind of tennis preparation is and where that may fit in the tennis recruiting landscape. And then reach out to all those schools, reach out to all those coaches, fill out the recruit questionnaires that are on athletics websites. Coaches look through all of that. And that's totally an appropriate way to kind of initiate contact. The next thing that I would be really, really prepared to do, especially if we're talking about selective, highly selective Division III schools, is be prepared to put forward your transcript. Coaches are not going to want to necessarily go down the road of recruiting you and, talking about a potential spot on the team without knowing your level of academic preparation. So it's very common at the D3 level for coaches to ask prospective students they're recruiting very early on for transcripts through their junior year, what courses they're taking for senior year, any test scores they have, whether that's SAT or ACT, potentially any sort of resume listing the activities they're involved in. So I would also kind of start getting ready to prepare those materials and send those to the coaches of the schools you're interested in.
Great. And so once you've made that initial contact, what happens after that point? What's happening on the coach's side and the school side? Yeah.
So after you make contact with the coach, pass along those materials. There's a little bit of variance here depending on which schools you're talking about, but in general, coaches are going to take those materials that you've provided, run them by an admissions person like myself, and that admissions person is going to be able to give a preliminary, not conclusive, but idea of what kind of candidate they are for admission. Because we don't want to waste the prospective student's time. We don't want to waste the coach's time. So we really do try to have some of those conversations pretty early. So that could ultimately manifest in a letter from the coach or school saying that they're likely to be admitted, but it could also result in less formal communication from the coach saying, hey, I talked to so-and-so in the admissions office. They think that, they think that you're likely going to be admitted, especially if you do well during fall of your senior year or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there's different ways it can happen.
So I know in Division I programs, a lot of them, not all of them, but, if the coach wants you and you're borderline academically, sometimes the coach can call in a favor, or, do something to help you get admitted to the school if you're going to be on the team. Does that happen at the Division III level?
Yeah, so I think most Division III schools recognize the kinds of contributions that our student athletes on campus are providing in terms of, contributing to that sense of community, the school spirit, the fact that, being talented at your sport is valuable. Like it's, valuable to have musicians and artists. So I think certainly that is something that plays a primarily positive role when we're evaluating prospective student athletes. And we are aware of students that are recruited by the coaches, so that does play a role, especially along the margins. I'm not aware of any Division III schools that do anything particularly egregious. But I say that knowing that, I don't know if you've heard, Lisa, but there was a massive corruption scandal.
Oh, really? I hadn't heard.
Did you hear about that? Yep. So I say that, tepidly. But I do think in light of that, Operation Varsity Blues, that there is going to be a little more skepticism on the admission side when working with coaches, especially at highly selective schools. So I think you're going to see a little bit more of a movement towards more verification that happens in admissions from, what the coach or prospective student may be saying about their level of accomplishment. I think tennis is probably less vulnerable to these kinds of things than other sports, just because it is so empirical with results. But there were tennis players involved in the scandal as well. So
yeah, there were, and tennis coaches, sadly. So I mean, speaking of that, has something come down from on high at Oxy to the admissions people saying, hey, look, we've got to be extra vigilant here, and here are the changes we're making and all of that?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely, I have a ton of confidence in the integrity of our process. And I'm really thankful for that. But you would be, I think, missing the point of what happened if you didn't take this as a moment to sort of reassess the systems that you have in place and understand potential areas that may be vulnerable. So absolutely, we are requiring coaches to submit as much empirical information as they have around a recruited student athlete. So if it were a tennis player, especially in my role, because I may be more conversant with the tennis nomenclature than other admissions folks, but like tennis recruiting ranking, UTRs, like those are all things that will be checked and verified. But I think even beyond some of that just general skepticism, we've had to take a moment as an institution, and I think all of us who are associated with college athletics, to really think about why it is we value athletics the way we do, and make sure that we're able to communicate that externally. Because in the public discourse and meeting with prospective students and parents of people that aren't recruited student athletes, I think there's probably a little bit of there's definitely criticism facing the processes that do exist. So I think it's really important for all of us who work in athletics to be able to think about why it is we value sports and why we think it's important to have those on college campuses.
What has the Varsity Blues scandal done in terms of the import of test scores? Has it changed how test scores are looked at? Test scores meaning SAT, ACT.
Yeah. That's not something, I guess, do you mean because of what was happening with the test scores and the
test takers and fraud?
Yeah. So unfortunately, that hasn't, that's something that we knew had the capacity to exist So that test scores have always been vulnerable to those kinds of things, and that's why they're just part of the process. So I think they still remain a part of the process, but I do emphasize that it's just a part, and we look at all of the components of the application in conjunction with one another. So that's, including the transcripts, the recommendations, the extracurriculars, the essays. So I think that's why it's important to really look at everything that's being submitted in conjunction with one another.
If you have a prospective student athlete who has the athletic skill to be recruited to the tennis team at Oxy, but is maybe shy on academic qualifications, specifically having to do with the SAT or ACT, is that something that you would go back to the coach or go back to the family and say, hey, we think you're a great fit for our school. However, we need you to get your test scores up. You're going to need to take the test again. And okay. So that does happen.
So that there are definitely instances where we would encourage a prospective student athlete that really would like to attend Occidental, that it would be in their interest to take their test scores again. And but that's something that that again, I do want to emphasize that testing is one part of many in the process. So it's not the be all end all.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of, again, what makes Division III different, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we went online today, there's all these rules around, compliance with the NCAA, and the compliance rules differ from division to division, and NAIA doesn't fall under those compliance rules because they are not considered part of NCAA. And I know you're not a compliance officer, but if a prospective student athlete is interested in looking at your school, at what point can they make contact with the coach? And at what point can they expect a coach to get back in touch with them?
No, I appreciate you couching it with Jordan is not a compliance expert. And I do think that it's important to say at the outset that every athletics department does have someone who manages compliance. So if there ever are any questions, prospective student can confer with a compliance officer at the school they're interested in. But really at a place like Occidental, there's no need to establish contact, I think, before junior year. And in large part, that's because at that point, the student's academic preparedness is so largely unknown that there's just not a whole lot of substance to that conversation around admissibility. So I really do think that junior year is a totally appropriate time to reach out to the coach of the team that you're interested in pursuing and really getting a sense of where you may fit into their plans. So that is something that's a little different on the timeline. I would say that things are a little more delayed on the Division III side as opposed to the Division I side. I know Division I recently came out with new rules around what the earliest is someone could verbally offer scholarships.
Right.
So yep.
Right. And we hear these stories about, Division I coaches, having their eye on 12-year-olds, that they're following. And so there's this fear that if you haven't emailed the coach and sent a video, by October of your freshman year of high school, that you've missed the boat. That's not the case. Let me just say that is not true. But that said, it's interesting to hear that at Division III, really, it's not true. That really, until you have that academic history, there's really nothing the coach or the school can do.
No one. Junior year is a totally appropriate time to start for Division III recruitment, and it really is, driven by that academic piece, and there's just not that same level of anxiety with scholarship offers and things like that I think precipitates an earlier process at the Division I level.
Well, since you brought up scholarships, let's kind of go down that path a little bit, because as I mentioned earlier, parents would like to think that there's going to be some sort of scholarship money available after they've invested all of this time and money and energy into their child's junior tennis development. what types of scholarships are there at Division III, and what is the best way for families to go about applying for them or even finding out about them?
Mm-hmm. So I'll just for the sake of clarity, I'll just state that Division III, of course, doesn't offer athletic scholarships, but there are really two other primary forms of financial aid. One is in the form of merit-based financial aid. At most institutions, to be considered for merit-based financial aid, you don't need to do anything extra to be considered for the merit aid that's offered at that institution. By virtue of applying, you'll be considered for that merit aid. That's definitely how it works at Occidental. In addition to merit-based financial aid, there's need-based financial aid. And for need-based financial aid, this is looking more closely at a family's kind of individual financial circumstances. So at Occidental, for need-based financial aid, we require two forms, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, as well as the CSS profile, which is on the College Board website. And from those two forms, we determine a family's expected contribution. And we are a school that meets 100% of a family's demonstrated need. So whatever that expected family contribution is, we subtract it from the total cost of attending Occidental, and we are committed to meeting the entire difference with the financial aid award.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why.
That's kind of huge. Let's say that one more time, Jordan, because I mean, that's huge.
Yep. So we meet 100% of a family's demonstrated need for need-based financial aid. And that's why I think it's really short-sighted to, think about getting a quarter scholarship, on the men's tennis team. I think women's tennis is a head count sport, so maybe they only offer full scholarships. Is that right?
Yes, and there are 8 of them.
Yep, 8. So they're absolutely and maybe more financially viable to pursue a Division III institution than a Division I institution. And really, in order to get a sense of what that cost may look like, I think families should really just go on the financial aid websites of the institutions that they're interested in. It's a federal mandate to have a net price calculator, which is a calculator that you would put in your financial information, and then you would get a close approximation of what that kind of cost burden is going to look like. And then you can get a sense early on, as opposed to, maybe April when you have to decide where you're going, of what, what's feasible financially. But absolutely, there's tons of ways at the Division III level to have an affordable college experience and an elite kind of academic experience as well.
Right. So when Occidental is weighing an entrant or an applicant who is planning to play sports on campus, how much of the athletic ability comes into play and how much of the academic ability comes into play? Or, does it differ by each student? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah.
It came out really kind of convoluted.
No, I definitely think I understand what you're asking. Really, the most important piece is always going to be the level of academic preparation. So that's going to be the starting point for everyone, recruited student athlete or otherwise. We want to make sure that all of our students are academically prepared to be successful at Occidental. We're a liberal arts college, so we ask that our students take classes across different academic disciplines, and knowing that they have kind of a necessary academic foundation to be successful is paramount. So that's where we start. But as I mentioned earlier, we practice something called holistic review. So we're looking at the essays, we're looking at the recommendations, we're looking at the activities, all in concert with one another. And there's, it's as much of an art as it is a science. And we weigh that athletic piece like we do other extracurriculars, something that's going to be really valuable to contributing to the community. So that is something that certainly students with two similar academic profiles that are maybe marginal candidates, if one's a recruited student athlete, then that will help them in the process. But it's not something where we're making drastically different decisions for a recruited student athlete versus non-student athlete.
Got it. And in terms of academics, obviously you look at GPA. What is the current school of thought around GPA and the importance of taking AP classes or, honors classes where your GPA might suffer because it's a tougher, more rigorous curriculum than an on-level class where, a student who takes all on-level classes may have a higher GPA than a student who's taking the AP honors, international baccalaureate, those types of classes.
And I think that's a great question, and one that families should definitely be prepared to ask the various institutions that the prospective student is interested in. Speaking for Occidental, we absolutely care about seeing that advanced honors, IB, AP level coursework, because we found that students that are taking the more rigorous courses, that is more predictive of their future success at Occidental. So we absolutely encourage students to take those advanced higher level courses within reason. We obviously would never want anyone to take anything kind of to the detriment of being able to, play their sport or, have their mental health suffer or something like that. So obviously there's kind of a fine line. And I think it's also important for students to really think about sort of what their academic curiosities are and pursue those at a high level, and not necessarily just take, the most advanced course for the sake of taking the most advanced course, but really think about kind of what where their intellectual curiosity is taking them curricularly.
With tennis players, that there is kind of an uptick in this whole notion of virtual school, homeschool, in order for these kids to train more, to travel to more tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. How does Occidental look at that type of academic background?
Yeah, we definitely admit schools from non-traditional learning environments. I do think that we really do feel more confident when we have some evidence of a student being in a traditional learning environment in some capacity in high school. So maybe that means taking some online classes and virtual classes, but then taking classes at the local community college or something like that, because we are very much a traditional learning environment. So we find that students are kind of best set up who have also at least had recent experience in that way. So we do like students to have some history of being in a traditional learning environment, but certainly admit students from non-traditional learning environments as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
What else do we need to know? I feel like I've asked you so many questions, but is there anything I'm forgetting to ask you?
Lisa, I think we've covered a lot of territory today.
I do too. Thank you for that. You have a very nice breadth and depth of knowledge, and I appreciate you sharing it with all of us. If my listeners have more questions for you, are you up for fielding those, or would you be okay with somebody sending you an email? Or
absolutely, yeah. No, I'm more than happy to be a resource for your listeners.
Okay, so is it okay if I share your email address in the show notes?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So to my listeners, make sure y'all read the show notes on parentingaces.com. Jordan Brown's email address will be there if you have any questions for him. Is there anything else about Oxy that, put the sales pitch on in these last couple minutes?
If you're looking for a small liberal arts college that's located in a city where Los Angeles is an extension of your classroom, and you want to compete in one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive, Division III tennis conference, then we are an absolutely great fit for you.
I love it. That was the elevator pitch.
I did work in PR for a little bit, yeah.
I was going to say, you definitely come from the PR world. I love it. Well, Jordan Brown, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your insights about Division III and recruiting at that level, and what our young players need to be doing to prepare to be recruitable at that level. And Occidental is a phenomenal school. I have several friends who went there, and even though I grew up in Louisiana, I knew people at Oxy. So they are very lucky to have you, Jordan. And, the tennis program especially is so lucky to have you there with all of your knowledge and experience to bring to all the prospective student athletes and their families that are coming through. So congratulations to you on landing your dream job.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And, I think I speak for your listeners with us feeling lucky to have you and your platform and being able to bring on exciting guests. So thank you so much for your podcast and all the work that you do.
Thank you. That's very sweet. And to my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.
I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll share the podcast with your tennis community. For all the information you need to navigate the junior and college tennis journey, be sure to check out parentingaces.com.